Nika, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our September webinar. Our topic is Demystifying Design Systems, and our speaker is Morgan Guegan of Evolving Web. How did I do, Morgan?
Very well, very well.
Okay. So before
Perfect pronunciation.
Yes, okay. So before I hand it over to you, I kind of want to talk about Drupal for Gov. We have a lot of things going on. So most of you all are familiar with us. We are a community of open source advocates, and we love all things open source. So in addition to this webinar that we hold every third Thursday at 3 p.m., I'm excited to say that we will have our conference in November 1st and 2nd, Drupal GovCon. We also do Drupal Global Training Days, half-day training days. We did, I believe we had one a few months ago, all things content. And we also participate in the Gov Summit at DrupalCon North America. So if you're interested in have more information, follow us on LinkedIn and Slack. And please, if you are interested in presenting or just have questions, please email us at drupalforgov@gmail.com. So I want to share some information about our conference that's coming up in November, the beginning of November. If you haven't registered already, please register. I know that the government shutdown is looming over our heads. However, we will still be holding Drupal GovCon, even if it shuts down or if it doesn't. If you need a place to stay, we do have room blocking for Residence Inn and Hilton Garden Inn. So reserve your room now, and also sign up for training. It's free. The trainers are awesome, but you will need to register for the event, and then once you register for the event, you can register for training. Other important dates. DrupalCon Lille in France, I believe, is happening October 17th through the 20th. There is also NEDCamp in New England that's happening November 17th and 18th. And there's also more camps that are happening throughout the United States and country. So if you're interested, check out the Drupal.org community events page. We're always looking for space to house our half days or a multi-day Drupal for Gov event. So if you have the space, please reach out to us via email or on our other social media channels. If you miss a session or a webinar and you're interested in catching up, we always upload these to YouTube, and we also list them on our Drupal for Gov webinars page. And now I would like to introduce Morgan, who's a creative director at Evolving Web, and he builds brands, stories, and experiences through multimedia art and design. Thank you, Morgan. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And you should now have the ability to share yours.
All right. Yes, thank you, Nika. Thanks for that intro. Drupal.gov, Washington, right? I've got my ticket. I'm coming.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so let me see. I'm just going to share my screen.
And if anybody has questions, please leave them in the chat and I will assist in moderating.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Let me just set everything up. All right, all right. So yes, so again, like first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today, because I know we're, I know how busy our schedules are. And so if you take the time to join us here today and listen on this, it's truly an honor. So thank you for joining. And I really hope that I can bring, value to you guys during this short period of time. Okay, so, well, as Nika said, I'm Morgan Guegan, Creative Director at Evolving Web. And let's talk about design systems and see what are their opportunities, what are the opportunities with design systems, what are some of the risks associated with it, and how we can best create them. All right, but first of all, I want to go back memory lane a little bit. And so you see here, so this is, let me just have a little, can you guys see, I just want to check a little bit before I get into it. Can you see the Zoom, the Zoom interface on my screen sharing? Or is it okay, Nika?
It's okay. I can't see it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so let's go back down in memory lane for a little while. So this is me 10 years ago in 2014, so 9 years ago, almost 10. And it was back in London. I used to work in an agency called Wieden Kennedy. And for a bit of context, I lived in London for close to 10 years, worked in some of the best agencies there. I traveled a bit as well. I lived in Shanghai for 1 year, and then I moved to Montreal with my wife now. And from Montreal, I worked remotely for Facebook for a couple of years, where I contributed to some of the design systems there. Also, I work for a startup, an AI startup in Montreal called Element AI. And we built AI products. We had a family of six apps, and we did a design system for that. And then that brings me back to Evolving Web, which I now work at as creative director. All right, but let's go back to that office, Wieden Kennedy, in London in 2014, sorry. And so one thing that was happening on that summer of 2014, one thing that was happening was that there was the Glastonbury Festival. And it's a little bit like Woodstock, back in the days, it was a huge festival. I know that some of you probably know about it. And you see that lineup was insane. You have Lily Allen, look at this, Ed Sheeran. What else? Lana Del Rey. She was popular back in the day. And this is how it felt to be at Glastonbury. Really, look at this. These people are having fun. But the thing is, actually, I didn't go to Glastonbury, and the reason why I didn't go, and I remember to this day what I was doing on that day. And I was back at the office. I was reading up Google material design, because on the 24th of June, 2014, Google released their first design system. And I was back at the office reading up that design system, one page after the other. And I really remember how it felt going through that design system, where they're documenting all this and communicating all of a sudden about all these design principles that they had, thought up of, and which was just mesmerizing. I remember, for example, that I went on the Wayback Machine, and you can see these, and I remember that they had documented that in nature you do not have straight lines. You never have a straight line, and actually you always have curves. And if you want your UI design to move in a more natural fashion, you always had to have a little curve. I was insane. Who would have thought of things like that? There was also, back in 2014, it's like drop shadows were huge. They're actually still pretty big right now, but they had looked at drop shadows and they had put drop shadows at an angle and looked at them on a 3D in a 3D perspective and had measured the space between the interface and the background and given guidelines on how to use them. So that was pretty incredible. So who would do these kinds of things? And what was what this reminded me of actually is that there's this quote by Adria Ferran, who's the head chef at El Bullis, one of the best restaurants in the world. And he said, it's not important to be the first one to do something. It's important to be the first one to conceptualize it. And it always stuck with me when I read this quote. And for some reason, it felt like Google were actually the first ones to conceptualize something that everybody was thinking about. Okay, but really, like, let's see, because you might think, okay, so that's great, but how does that relate to me? Why do I need a design system? I mean, I'm not Google. Do I need to talk about, curves and drop shadows and things like that? So let's take a concrete example. Let's say you've got a new product that's coming out and you got to communicate about it. So you decide to create a website that's going to talk about that product. You design it, build it. It's on brand, perfect brand expression, and you launch it. It's amazing. You get great feedback. Congratulations, well done. Now things get a little bit more complicated 2 months after you got a new product out. And time, it's a new, all the functionalities are different. It's a new, it's a different product that is not related to the first one. So, well, you decide to do it with a new team, actually. So the first team that did the first website is not available. It's a new team doing it. And the brand expression is slightly different. It's slightly tainted, so the brand experience is slightly tainted, but it's okay. You can live with it. But then 6 months later, that's when you lose control of it completely. You got this new product out. You reach out to an agency this time that is going to do the campaign, and actually they're specialized in koala bears. And don't get me wrong, these are really cute, but now the expression, the brand expression and the brand experience is disjointed. And that's the face of the customers that are going through that disjointed experience when they're going through one website after the other. Now, I'm just kidding, because it's true, that actually, customers don't really care about brand consistency and these kinds of things. So they actually don't really care about any kind of branding. But it's true that it's a missed opportunity, right, to build that sort of trust with that consistency and that consistent experience. But who might actually look like this, really? Well, it's the execs that are paying for the design and the building of all these websites. So they might actually be looking like this. And you know what they say on Shark Tank, right? They say, I'm out. Oh, all right. They say there must be a better way. That's what they say, right? Okay, so let's try to define what a design system is. And you can think about it like a cookbook for your brand. And there was, well, one thing is there was actually a big debate before this presentation as to whether it should be, in terms of analogy, if it should be a map for a treasure island map, or it could be the classic Lego block analogy. And well, I thought it'd be, let's do something a little bit different. Let's do the cookbook for your brand. But if it was a cookbook for your brand, well, the one thing that it would be also is you would have a little fridge with that cookbook with all the ingredients needed, ready to use to cook that brand. And so if we had to do a definition, what would it be? Well, it would be a set of reusable components and clear guidelines for the design and development of an unlimited number of applications or websites. Okay, so that's still a mouthful, right? Set of reusable components and clear guidelines for the design and development of an unlimited number of applications or websites. Okay, so let's try to simplify it even more. Who doesn't like a good graph? So design system equals reusable components plus guidelines. Try to be really clear. And let's try to click down on these and see, well, what is actually in those reusable components and guidelines. So if we open that up, and this is where it becomes really interesting, because you see the breadth of it is that you include all these teams, and you see you've got marketing, you've got brand design, UX, UI, you've got content, development, and this is all the teams that are going to be that are involved in the creation of a website, that are actually going to be involved in the creation of the design system. Now, you don't need to have all of these segments of content in your design system at first, right? You don't need all of these. You can start small and expand over time, expand with the growth of the company, expand with your needs. But I would say that you would want to start with the reusable components part and then expand with the rest. Now let's look at each of these individually and see what they're really made of. Okay, so first, got your brand strategic frameworks. And that's going to be owned by marketing, the marketing team. And it's going to be all your brand values, mission statements, vision statements, messaging frameworks, and these kinds of things. And I got some really good examples here for you. So you see on the left here, you've got the Atlassian brand values. And see, as I mentioned, you have your mission, you have your promise, values, personality, and all these are nicely packed all together right there. So for, let's say, like a copywriter that needs to write something for the brand, they can access this and write something up really quickly that's going to feel, it's going to be on brand, and that's going to have all the right messaging tied to it. But also it goes further than that, and you see on the example on the right here, in the Meta design system, well, you have even templates for those messaging frameworks and for those brand frameworks, and so that if you need to create a new brand, you can actually use these and make sure that the new brand is actually going to fit really well with the ecosystem. So that is really powerful, right? It's not just communicating about the brand, but it's also helping the teams build new brands. Then you're going to have your brand design and that's going to be, so the visual identity, and that's going to be all your brand guidelines. So you're going to get, your logos, your colors, typography, iconography, illustration, photography, all these things, they're going to be documented all together. And what's going to be good is it's not going to be in a PDF format anymore, so you're going to be able to update it really easily. Here are some really good examples. You see on the left here, on the WhatsApp design system, you've got typography that's documented. What's really interesting is that it's not anymore just, here's our typography, it's going to be Helvetica. No. You got Helvetica. Well, it is, I'm not sure if it's Helvetica here, but it's that it says, it shows it with the headline, the subtitle, body copy, call to action coming all together, and it really gives clear indications of how to use it. So it's very clear. In the middle here, you've got the IBM example, and you see there are photography guidelines, very inspiring. So it shows the breadth of the imagery that they want to use, but also that they recommend to use, and also they're going to explain how to shoot that photography, the kind of lighting to use, the kind of cast, how to do the casting, things like that. But also you're going to be able to download those photos, so that's going to be very, very helpful. And you see on the right the Shopify example where they have all their icons that are documented and all together here. And what's interesting is also that you've got a search bar, right? And so you can search those icons. What's great is that if they're easily searchable, well, they're going to be more easily usable. Then you're going to have your UX and UI design guidelines, right? And trust me, you're going to need these. Basically, if you give all the assets that we've seen before this to 100 different designers, well, what are you going to get? You're going to get 100 different usages of these. So you're really going to need to clarify anything that's needed, so that really you get a consistent usage of all these elements. And so here you see that's really when you get into the details of it, what they say, God is in the details. And as an example here, well, you have on the left here, you see you can specify even the line height and the height between each lines, right? So that's like really like reading between the lines, as they say. And on the right, the Pinterest example here, they explain how to they explain the emotional connotations with color and how to use it in UI. So you've got blue for informative content, recommendations are purple, and then success green, warning orange, and red is for errors. You see, so that's it makes sense, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it's used in the same way throughout your experience of your website, right? And also what you see is you've got your do's and don'ts. On the left, use it like this, don't use it like that. So that's really very, very helpful. And people tend to not want to do these do's and don'ts. And you're going to have, you're going to have designers say, well, obviously you're not going to do that. Well, it's better, to document it, better be safe than sorry. So document all these things, because you never know how your assets are going to be used. So copywriting style. So this is going to be owned by, a content team, and you're really going to get into the syntax of the copywriting, right, for your brand. And it's not just for marketing messaging, right? So it's going to be also for UX copywriting. So you've got your CTAs, navigation, error messages, and all these kinds of things. And it's really important that it's your interface that's actually talking to you. So you're going to see here some really good examples. And so you've got the classic example from Microsoft where they show how to use the pronouns. And basically, it's either the interface talking to you from a you perspective or from a me perspective. And, there is no right or wrong answer, but what's important is that you are consistent and that you always use the same perspective when talking to the user. And it's that that example of the account, right? Is it your account or is it my account? You can use both, but you want to always use it in the same way. And on the right here, the example from HubSpot, very interesting, right? They explain that at the beginning of each paragraph, they're using an action verb. Here, from the business that the HubSpot to grow better every day. Create apps and customer integration for business using HubSpot. So all the paragraphs start with an action verb. That's really, really powerful, but you gotta clarify that and document it so that everybody does that, or like that you make sure that it's used consistently. Then you got design kits. This is owned by UX UI teams. And what these are, basically, it's going to be design files, and they are linked in the design system, and designers can open them up and start designing right away with them. So the example on the left, Google sliders. What's interesting here, so what's interesting is that you've got different scales to those design components. You can go from really small components, like on the left, you got the Google sliders that are really small, and it's only one element. And on the right, you can have really like big components that go all the way to a full page. And what this means, you see on the right, the Facebook app design system, you see, and this is actually called a sticker sheet on the right, where you've got all the elements together, and it on board and really quickly have access to all these things and create a new experience really quickly with this. So you can really go from micro to macro. Now then, development. So you're going to have the code snippets, and this is going to be owned by development team, of course. And what's really powerful with this is that you have the code snippets, which is live code, with the live component at the same time. So you see here, you've got the button, the login button with the live code. And before they used to be separated. So that basically you have your code that's somewhere, and the developers would have, the code would be stored, but you did not have it live right next to it. So there's a lot of ambiguity. You're not really sure what you're looking at. So here you see them next to each other. Here on the IBM example, you have the forms, the live forms, and below it, right below it, you have your live code. So you can experiment with it and you see it right away. You can check all the different states, all the different iterations. And so that's really, really helpful. On the right, same thing, MailChimp, you can see all the buttons with the code that's right below it. What would be the benefits of using a design system? All right, first of all, reusability, right? You're going to have a lot less duplicate work. So it's over the days of working for months on something and just to realize that somebody else has done this months ago already, and it's already been sorted. You're going to reduce the risks of any new design work, because all your design team is equipped with some good foundations, right? So they start, as we've seen with the sticker sheets and all these design files, they start with tried and tested files. So, you reduce the risks significantly. Also, it's self-service, so which is quite mind-boggling, right? So all the teams can just log in to the design system and access all these elements, and they don't need to be briefed anymore. So you cut out the middleman, and so it makes the teams and the team members a lot more autonomous. And again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Once something has been done by a team, you can just everybody can start using it, and you can tackle something that hasn't been done before, something that's more difficult. Next benefit is going to be consistency. Now, I don't see it necessarily in terms of consistency. I like to think of it more as a complementarity, and because I don't think everything should be the same as long as everything works together, right? So what's going to happen is that the external work becomes more on brand. It's really easy to share with external partners, agencies. You can just share a link, everybody has access to it, and you can update them, of course, right? If ever you need to change anything, and everybody has access to the latest and greatest. The teams start to think at scale. Yes, because when they start to see the power of this, well, when they're creating a new element, they're not going to think necessarily in terms of custom design, custom build. They're going to start to think, well, what if it's going to be used by somebody else? What if it's going to be used on another website? How would I create this? How would I design this? How would I code this so that it can be used and it can be reused? So teams start to think like that. Things start to be more consistent across platforms, from your app, social media, your desktop and mobile experiences, and all your websites start to feel more consistent. And also, and that's actually one of the biggest benefits of design systems, right? It's going to be communication, and that's one of the most underrated benefits of design systems. It's really communication. You're breaking down the silos between the teams, which is pretty incredible, because you're getting all these teams that we mentioned, right? You got marketing, brand design, UX, UI, content, development. They're all working on the same platform to build that same thing. So you're forcing everybody to work together anyways. And now they have more visibility on the work, right? So they are the work is literally there. So it makes it so much easier to access that, there's like less excuses. When everything is on the same platform, well, then you've got a common language that is emerging, right? So all that syntax, naming conventions, things like that start to emerge. And when all these things come together, well, that's when you get a common vision that starts to emerge. And that is a beautiful thing. And that's why I think that this definition could actually work for a design system, which is more based on communication, right? It's a communication platform that enables collaboration between designers and developers to help teams work more efficiently together. Okay, so now we've seen all these things where, let's say that you want to start building one. Well, where do you start? Where do you start from? And so if we go back to the three websites, the three examples that we saw at the beginning, and let's imagine that all the components that are on those three websites are here represented by one of these squares. Well, what we can do is we're going to do a component audit. And a component audit is going to feel a little bit like throwing all your clothes on your bed and start sorting through them one by one. And it's going to be super messy at first, but then eventually you get to something that's very organized, like a spreadsheet, and you document all the components that you have. And this is going to help you prioritize, and by identifying all the common components that are recurring. And so when you identify the components that are recurring enough times, the ones that are painful enough, when it's painful enough that you have to do it over and over, that is when you can say, all right, enough is enough, that's it, I can invest in it and add it to the design system. And so good example would have been from the three websites, good example would have been those calls to action at the top of that page. And yeah, I mean, how hard can it be, right, to add those that button to the design system? It's just a button, right? How hard can it be? Wrong, right? It's not just one button. You've got different states. You have those 5 states that goes with one button. You've got the default state, hover, you have pressed, when it's disabled, and you also have the focused. So that's already a lot more. And then you also have your secondary buttons, right? It's not just the primary, you get your secondary, and they all have the 5 states. Now you've got 10 buttons. And then you have your tertiary button, you have your ghost buttons, and you have your links. So it's a lot more, it's part, you're starting to see, right, that it's part of a broader system that's a lot more complex than it seems. And that's not even to mention when you have buttons, when you have icons that are in the buttons, as well as all your dark mode. Okay, but let's say that you actually want to, you're decided, you have done your component audit, you have identified that, you know, it is a need, and you want to start doing it. So what are the tools to actually do that design system and create the design system, right? And it's going to be a little bit of compromise, and I've got some examples for you of tools and platforms that you can use to create those design systems, and they're all going to be focused on different things, and you're going to have to see either that you can have to compromise depending on what you choose, but you know, dreams do come true, and you do have the opportunity to actually get everything that you need. And I swear I don't have sponsor money here. This is really, I'm just really trying to show some good tools that are out there. So first is BrandPad, and BrandPad is going to be more focused on on the brand guidelines side of things, on all the brand design, and you're going to have logos, you're going to have typography, all these things that are going to be easily documented on BrandPad. But what you're not going to have is you're not going to have live code, the code snippets, and the live components. So that's going to be, you know, one side that's really missing. But you can start it with that, but that's going to be something that's going to be missing. On the other hand, you have Storybook, which is very popular, and this one is more focused on development. And on Storybook, you have all the live components. You see here that component at the top right, and you have your code snippets, but it is very difficult on Storybook to actually publish rich content, meaning images and you know, titles, body copy, and all these things. So all the guidelines are going to be much harder to publish on Storybook. And basically you can do it, but because it's a developer tool, you actually need to code that content using Markdown language, which is, you know, it's not, supposedly it's not hard, but you know, when you're a marketer, when you're, you know, a designer, content writer, you don't necessarily know Markdown, and you don't necessarily want to learn it. So it makes it harder. That's a big barrier to entry to get that platform to really serve all the teams. And then that's it. Frontify, on the other hand, does all these things. So it has that, it does do the brand guidelines. It also does the development side of things, where you get your live components and code snippets. So this is really the best of both worlds. You have that full spectrum. You see at the top here of that example, you get the style guide, logo library, all the libraries, and the UI library as well. And then, I mean, to be honest, what happens often is that you see that brands will actually do a custom build. they will actually do a custom build, and so that then there is absolutely no compromise. They control all the layout of the design system, and they can publish any content that they want on it. And what this does is basically, well, your design system becomes a regular design and build website project. It just that's what it becomes. You have to design it, you build it, and then you put in the content and you upload the content. All right, so yes, it does make sense. All these things are great, but actually, do you really need one? And what we've done is we've created these scales and to help decide and gauge, if this is something that's really going to be for you. And depending on where you land on those scales, well, it might help you decide whether you want to invest in a design system or not. And first of all, you can look at your business model, right? Do you have lots of different clients? Are you an agency? Or do you have your own product or own products and own ecosystem that is not necessarily going to change too much? Staff and resources, right? This is going to be an investment, so you need to have the staff that are going to be available to work on this. So is it limited? Is it available? That's going to be super important. The rhythm of change. Do you have a stable brand that is set up for the future, that is very robust? Or do you have a volatile brand that needs to follow trends and change very frequently? How many websites do you have? Do you have less than 5? Maybe you can wing it, and actually not, you don't need it, and you might be able to pull it off without a design system. Or do you have hundreds of websites? I mean, I've been talking to a client the other day, has 500 websites. And then do you have decision maker support? That is going to be one of the key things, right? Because as I said, it is an investment, and if you don't have the support from the decision makers, well, chances are when the wind changes direction, you're probably going to have to stop working on it. So you're going to make sure that you're setting up for success in the future, and it's for the long term. And talking about decision makers, well, let's see how to govern design system and some of the best ways to do that. And there's two approaches to governance for design systems. There's a distributed approach, which can be called sometimes as well a federated approach, and you have a centralized approach. So first, distributed approach is going to be all the design and decisions are made by local teams. And for me personally, it worked really well. That governance system worked really well at that startup that I mentioned. It was a small team, and we were building 6 products. And for each product, each of the 6 products that we were building, there was a different designer. And all of the designers were very eager and very excited to contribute to the design system. And so any difference, any discrepancy, inconsistency in the design were ironed out during meetings. So there was a lot of communication. But because everybody was excited and engaged everybody was excited to contribute. Well, there was a great adoption. Everybody really wanted to use the design system, wanted to contribute to it. So it worked really well with that smaller team. And then there's the centralized model where all the decisions and all the design is made by a single team for the entire company. And that was more the model at Facebook, where, well, there was actually lots of design system teams because there were a lot of different design systems, and actually they had a cross design system that was overarching, but for each they had a centralized team, and it worked really well because it was a big company, and the design system that we're producing was very robust, very mature, and everybody was eager to use it because it was so good. So that's the thing as well. When you have a bigger company, then a centralized model might make more sense. And there's this quote from Laurie Kaplan at Atlassian, and she said, it wasn't hard to get designers to follow the guidelines. It was hard to get them to agree on the guidelines. It's food for thought. All right, so wrapping up, we see that the design systems has a ripple effect that benefits all the steps of creating a website and all the teams that are involved in it. So the employees can onboard quickly. They have access to all the foundational elements that are of great quality and with a self-service approach as well. So they can start creating high quality elements really quickly. The teams communicate more efficiently. They're working on the same platforms. They're using the same naming conventions. The company is starting to do economies of scale. They're not working, many times on the same thing. They're reusing the components. The brand is better represented in all the experiences, from desktop, mobile, apps, social media. It's starting to look consistent, and the customers are developing more trustworthy experience with the brand. And out of all these benefits, that are created by the design system, what's really important is, of course, all these benefits are really important, but the most important thing is not necessarily all these benefits that you achieve throughout the process. What's important is the company that you become in the process of creating a design system. Thank you. Neka, how did I do on time?
You did awesome on time. That was a great presentation. I love the sharing of the tools, and some of it you can even apply to like sites that don't necessarily use design systems, but just the concept. So I enjoyed your presentation. Do we have any questions?
Anybody has experience creating a design system here, or challenges?
And since this is such a small, we don't have that many people, feel free to unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, this is Aubrey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Morgan, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. I've been really looking forward to developing an internal design system for the intranet that I manage, and these are really helpful tools. One question I have is, do you have a recommendation about like how frequently to like periodically revisit the design system information that a team has put together, or is it continuously evolving, as needs change and everything? Because I'm looking forward to creating standards and enforcing those, but I also don't want to be constantly going back to the managers of content being like, okay, we have an update, please adopt this new style. Okay, we have another update, please not adopt this new style. I want to find a good balance between how frequently we might alter some of our design system features that we decide to adopt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, Aubrey. And it's true, I didn't mention that in the presentation, and I hate to say that, but it's true that it depends really on the rhythm of change that you have in your company, and it really depends on the needs. So it's hard to say, but what's important is to have, and it's something that maybe I should have addressed in the presentation, it's important to have a change log. And basically, so it's important that you've got your design system, but also you log in the changes that are made with the versions. So that's very important every time you make a change, so that then you don't need to communicate every time you do a change. Maybe if you do a radical change, that would be a good time to communicate about it. But I think that would be the most important, and keep it very agile, so that you can make frequent changes, but don't necessarily have to communicate about it to everybody. What's important is, because it is available and everything is centralized, you just need to update it and everybody has access to it. So that's the key thing, right? So you don't necessarily have to communicate about it to the whole company every time you make a change, just as long as you document and you log those changes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. Hi, this is Reed. One of the things that we're struggling with is having variants get too out of sync with the actual component. So, maybe have a card component, and then later on there's like content card and buy card and info card, and all of those things now are out of sync with the main component. And it's a real struggle to get those to be on. So then you make a change to card and everything down below it just kind of trickles with bugs and things. So do you have any suggestions on how to make those things that are based on a component and use those components not be so one-off or out of sync with the main component?
Mm-hmm. So that becomes, it's a difficult question. I would say that might become, would you say that those components are out of sync, but they are used on multiple platforms, or they're out of sync, but they're an isolated component that is used on maybe one website or several?
No, they're like used all over in the system, and but in that system there are too many variants, because this is a card component, but now we have to add another functionality for title and description instead of just description, and then we add another one that's similar, but then it's like, oh, but this title needs to be bigger than the title on this other card, and then all of a sudden you make a change to the original, trickles down, and it's like unintended consequences.
Yeah, I think that would come down to the governance model, and I think that is a design review kind of problem, where you have to make sure that, well, if it's out of sync, if it doesn't fit with the system anymore, well, you've got to make sure that maybe you do another pass, you iterate on it so that you make sure that it actually fits better. And I would say you need to reach out to the team that is in charge, and to make sure that to elevate the level.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Morgan, for presenting.
Thank you, Nika.
And please, everybody, sign up for our Drupal GovCon, and I'll see you next month for the webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Someone asked, Morgan, do you think you can share your slides?
Absolutely. I'll share them with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Have
Thank
a good
you.
remaining of your week, everyone. Bye.